How's everyone doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. So I've been waiting for a while to find an article that really laid out the SWIFT system and how important that system is to the global payment system. The flow of payments of around the world and how important it is to the financial system or the global economy, as it were. And I finally found a really good article here that I want to share everyone. Now, this is from the Epoch Times, and this is called "The Power Behind the Photo: Why SWIFT, Not Sanctions, May Shape the Ukraine Endgame." So, a little discussed institution headquartered in Belgium has become a decisive lever in the Ukraine conflict. So let's see, what does this say here? So when European leaders gathered in the Oval Office last week, Macron, von der Leyen, Starmer, Merz, the photo quickly made the rounds. President Trump sat behind the resolute desk, flanked by figures from across the Atlantic. The posture, the optics, the framing, it appeared to confirm a familiar narrative. Washington leads and Europe follows. But the real balance of influence isn't captured in images. It resides in quieter mechanisms, the systems beneath the surface that increasingly shape negotiations. At the center of that unseen power structure is a little discussed institution headquartered in Belgium called SWIFT. Now, in the context of the Ukrainian conflict, SWIFT, which stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, that's a mouthful, has become a decisive lever. Though often mistaken as merely a messaging platform, it is now a strategic instrument with capabilities to screen, freeze, and exclude. So in the war, exclusive from SWIFT has proved more economically consequential than any single battlefield loss. I should say in this war, exclusion from SWIFT has proved more economically consequential than any single battlefield loss. One case illustrates the stakes clearly, and this is with Russia's if I'm saying this right, man, Russell Kohlholz Bank. Russell Kohlholz Bank. If I'm saying that right, all right, we'll practice this 10 more times here, right? All right, obscure to most outside financial circles, Rosol, I'm just going to call it Rosol Bank, plays a pivotal role in Russia's rural economy. It finances roughly 15% of the country's agricultural business sector, including fertilizer exports and grain shipments. Moscow has consistently made its reconnection to SWIFT a condition for extending Black Sea grain deals, highlighting just how critical access is to maintaining even non-military economic flows. Yet, its access remains cut. Without SWIFT, Russell Bank cannot reliably process cross-border payments. Alternatives, such as Russia's SPFS, are limited, flagged for sanctions risk, and avoided even by some of Moscow's closer partners. Chinese and Turkish financial institutions have grown weary. OFAC scrutiny makes participation costly. In practical terms, without SWIFT, Russian exports must navigate workarounds fraught with uncertainty and delay. Washington has signaled flexibility. Since the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, the White House has floated the idea of targeted relief, trial exemptions tied to progress on humanitarian issues, resource trade, or even a ceasefire roadmap. This approach reflects a broader strategy: use selective sanctions relief as leverage, not as concession. But Europe takes a different view. So at a meeting in Paris earlier this year, EU leaders reaffirmed their stance: no access to SWIFT for any Russian bank until full withdrawal from occupied Ukrainian territory. The policy is not merely a negotiation tactic, it is treated as foundational. The European Commission reiterated this position, calling Russia's withdrawal a non-negotiable precondition for financial reintegration. This divergence is significant. So while Washington treats sanctions as a fluid tool, Brussels sees them as a principle. And in the case of SWIFT, it is Brussels that holds the administrative key. Despite American influence, SWIFT operates under EU jurisdiction. Decisions about membership, reconnection, and compliance flow through Belgium, not through Washington, D.C. That matters because the Kremlin sees Bank as more than a bank. It sees it as a wedge. If one entity can be reconnected under humanitarian grounds, the door opens for others. Gazprom Bank, Bank. Each new reconnection becomes a precedent. Each exception a potential erosion of the sanctions wall. It's not difficult to see the contours of the strategy. Russia ties grain exports to banking access. Ceasefire proposals are linked to transaction routes. By framing financial connectivity as humanitarian necessity, Moscow attempts to turn operational requirements into bargaining leverage. Yet the transatlantic gap on this issue is real. The Trump administration, weary of indefinite escalation, favors measured flexibility to extract concessions. European institutions, less convinced by Moscow's signals, remain committed to hard conditionality. That difference could become more than rhetorical. EU sanctions require unanimous renewal every 6 months. Hungary, already an outlier on Ukraine policy, continues to threaten vetoes. Some European capitals fear that if U.S. pressure for flexibility increases, internal EU cohesion may weaken. Quiet voices now warn that sanctions unity is not a given, it is conditional and finite. That is the paradox. The United States commands NATO forces, leads diplomacy, and provides the lion's share of financial aid to Ukraine. But Europe, by controlling access to SWIFT, holds the more durable power over Russia's economic reentry. It is, in essence, statecraft by infrastructure, not force of arms, but force of systems. This is why the Bank issue, seemingly marginal, carries strategic weight. It tests whether sanctions policy remains intact or begins to splinter under political and economic pressures. It measures whether transatlantic unity is resilient or conditional, and it challenges whether Europe's commitment to sanctions is compatible with Washington's push for deal-making. Trump's photo with European leaders may dominate headlines, but the decisions that shape the war's endgame may be happening in conference rooms thousands of miles away in Brussels, not in Washington. And that quiet divergence lies a deeper contest over timelines, terms, and tools, and perhaps ultimately over control. So very, very interesting article here on the power of the SWIFT system as it relates to global commerce and global finance. Again, I've been I was really waiting for an article that demonstrated the power of SWIFT in a way that this article demonstrates. So, and this leads us back to a discussion on BRICS. Now, what happened here? So the Ukraine war breaks out, Russia invades Ukraine, and during the Biden administration, and then Joe Biden basically puts the sanctions on Russia. And one of those sanctions is we're kicking you out of the SWIFT system. Now, I do not believe that that had ever happened before. I think, countries have put economic sanctions on other countries, but I don't believe that any country has ever actually gotten kicked out of the SWIFT system, at least not a world power. So when this happened, it sent shockwaves through the rest of the world, and the rest of the world, China, India, Brazil, North Korea, Iran, all these countries basically sat there and said, wait a minute, look at this. Like, if the U.S. can kick Russia out of the SWIFT system and basically cause them innumerable financial harm, they could do the same thing to any one of us. And it was basically like this. That was, imagine a red line, and the U.S. stepped over that red line. Thus, you then begin to see all of the movement toward the BRIC countries, and the BRICS countries basically saying, hey, we want to do this big reset. We want to have an alternative to the dollar. We want to create this kind of parallel economic system where we have our own system that operates very much like SWIFT, but maybe more of a digital system, maybe acting more on a blockchain, something like that. But you see where this goes, and this is why I really like this article, because it really points out the power that the SWIFT system has. And if a country gets cut off of that SWIFT system, the ramifications for them economically can be, disastrous. Now, to be fair, a lot of people out there probably say, well, hey, you know what? Russia got, what they deserved. They, shouldn't have invaded Ukraine and all that. And, there's definitely some truth to that. But the question is, did the U.S. go too far by cutting SWIFT off? Did the EU go too far by cutting Russia off of the SWIFT system? I think that's a very real question, because like I said, when it forces all these other countries around the world to basically stop and say, hey, we aren't sure that we really trust the United States. And the United States, if they drop the hammer on them, they could drop the hammer on us at any time, any moment. And that's a problem. Like, that's a problem for all of us. And, so again, it gets back to that old, I'm going to make a Spider-Man reference here. With great power comes great responsibility. Having the world reserve currency is a great thing, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility. And, you got to be very, very careful about how you wield that power, and about how some of the things that get done in the course of wielding that, because you may, fall into the line of the law of unintended consequences, as it were. So, but again, I hope that people really like this. Again, my point in this article was not necessarily to get, all deep into the U.S., Ukraine, Russia, war over there in Europe. That really wasn't the point. The point was to focus more on the SWIFT system. I wanted to try to make it, for people who aren't aware of what SWIFT was, I'm hoping that this maybe gave you a little bit more inclination as to what the organization does there, based over in Brussels in the EU, and how they really are critical to the facilitation of global commerce, global finance, global payment flow, if you will. And, the SWIFT system is just, basically, the world could not operate day in and day out without the SWIFT system. That's how important it is. So again, I hope this gave people a little bit better understanding, a little bit more glimpse into the SWIFT system and how powerful it is, and why we need to keep an eye on it and how it's being used around the world. So again, I hope people find that interesting, or found this interesting. So with that being said, I will wrap up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as that always helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I always love getting back to everybody. And as always, make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. I thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone has a great day out there, and I will see you again real soon. Thanks a lot.